Malkin is not our imaginary friend. She exists, and she's live in Colorado Springs. Good morning to you, Michelle.
Good morning. Yeah, that's right. I'm not your composite pundit.
No, although we know the president had a composite girlfriend, and that's a whole other story. Speaking of the president, he has met the press a couple of times. He just had his last press conference of the first term. And I know you feel as if the press corps has run out of gas. They're just going through the motions, asking softballs, really long questions, which are easy for him to dodge. What's up with them?
Yeah, well, they're just phoning it in now, and there are a lot of us that feel that way, and particularly a lot of us journalists who have real questions that we'd love to ask him. And Deborah Saunders, my friend at the San Francisco Chronicle, did a fabulous column on this phenomenon of them just going through the motions at these press conferences. Certainly that is not true of the Fox News journalists who continue to do the work that so many other journalists
won't do. Yeah, but we're frozen out. We're frozen out.
Yes, and we're punished for doing our jobs, right? But this is not a surprise if you look at how so many of these lapdogs and drool bucket award winners over the years, particularly in the early years, fawned and acted more as sycophants than reporters. And I remember very early on the kinds of questions they asked were along the lines of, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
Right.
And real questions like a New York Times reporter, Jeff Zeleny, who earned the scorn of many in our business when he asked what enchanted President Obama in his first days and weeks and months in office.
But, you know, I have to say in the last debt ceiling press conference, at least when a question came up about that, the president was, I think, taken aback. There were a couple tough questions with regard to that particular topic the other day. Do you think that's more of an anomaly?
Of course, it still is, and the fact that it is so noteworthy and newsworthy, I think, reflects poorly on the press. It is true that there are a few very good reporters out there in the White House press corps, non-Fox ones, that have been pursuing stories, and we know what happens. They get punished, they get yelled at behind the scenes. And the sense of jadedness that the president has with them, the thin-skinnedness with which he treats them, I think bespeaks of a very dysfunctional relationship.
Michelle, it was Major Garrett, and Major Garrett did something that Ed Henry also does. Follow-up question, and the president hates the follow-up question, because if he gets a tough question, he gives long answers, you almost forget the question, but what you do is you jump right back in before he's done, and it sounds rude, but it's the only way to get answers.
It is. It is so true. The famous filibustering of this president and the unwillingness, unfortunately, of the majority of the reporters to, yes, act rude and get back in his face and make him answer the questions that Americans want him to answer.
Instead, what the White House does a lot of is what they did yesterday. They had a signing where the president signed a number of executive orders, and it's interesting. He had he had 4 children near him, right behind him. You can see right there. Those are 4 kids who wrote him letters saying you got to do something about guns. There have been some on the right, Michelle, who have criticized him as using those children as props rather than, you know, props, or was it proper that they used the kids?
This is a time-tested tactic of the left, and I've followed it from the Clinton years onwards, of using kiddie human shields to deflect tough questions about the costs and consequences of these often reckless and rash public policy decisions that are born of emotionalism and, unfortunately, exploitation, and not any real commitment to solving the problems. And whether it was Obamacare or any health care policy for that matter, education, immigration, and now gun control, what these Democrats do is use children very cynically to try and deflect accountability for their actions, and in this case, very imperial actions on the part of the president. And I consider it a form of child abuse and political malpractice, very toxic.
Well, tell me if you think
and of
this.
Course,
Tell me if you agree with this, Michelle. If it had passed, if this gun legislation was passed, and kids are going to be affected, maybe schools are going to have armed guards, whatever it is, I don't have a problem with that. But this is something where he's looking to push. I think that's a problem. I also wasn't thrilled with the NRA bringing up the president's kids. I think they should just leave the president's kids alone.
Well, let me address both of those points. I think you have a point on the first count. However, what he does is engage in a basic logical fallacy, and there are so many of them. We're littered with them in Washington. Argumentum ad nauseum, where if you repeat something often enough, it's true. Argumentum ad hominem, where if you attack the person, you sabotage the truth. And now we have what I coined argumentum ad filium, that if you simply appeal to the children and you say, well, the children think we should do this, therefore, it is correct and a good thing to do. That's ridiculous, and we need to grow up when it comes to both rhetoric and public policy debate. On the point about the NRA pointing to the fact that the Obama children have armed guards and most children do not, I think it's an entirely different sphere of public policy. It is a legitimate point. And for the White House, and particularly for Michelle and Barack Obama, who have no problem dragging their daughters in front of the camera when they're arguing their own public policy points. Michelle Obama did it when it came to health care. She talked about her daughter's BMIs, blabbing about it. For them to say, you're not allowed in any way, shape, or form or capacity to talk about our children and the impact of public policy, hypocrisy.
Well, Michelle always has an opinion about every issue of the day. So great to see you. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next week.
You too. Take care.